Okay, so it's 9 o'clock in Tokyo time, and okay, so here I'm the chair of the session. So before starting the session, I'd like to speak a little bit about this instructions for participants. So the presentation will be 18 minutes plus 7 minutes Q&A, and please do timekeeping by yourself. Yes, and the English transcription is available. So if those who wants to put the transcription on, please press the live transcription button. And please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And all presenters will be archived on our YouTube channel. So if your camera is on, your face may also be archived there. Please note that. And if you have questions, please use the functionality of Zoom, so raise your hand button. It will be on the bottom of the screen, I believe. And you can also ask on text at the designated Slack channel. There will be a Slack channel that is with the name of the number of your presentation, like 1 or 1 2. Okay. And there will be a post-session discussion about 20 minutes. And at the time, we will have breakout rooms with numbers of the presenters, and the participants will go into the one of the breakout rooms and have a discussion with the presenters. Okay, that's all. So yes, so we'd like to proceed to the first presentation. Okay, so this session is about interactive system for music. And again, I'm your chair, Satoru Fukayama from AIST Japan. Okay, so the first presentation is about Suiview. Maybe the pronunciation is different. A web-based application that enables users to practice wind instrument performance. Please start your presentation.
Okay. Can you see us, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your introduction. Today I'll talk about web-based application Suiview. This quite sudden. Have you ever played the wind instruments? I think there are various people. As a side note, I'm a clarinet player. I started playing the clarinet in the brass band, and when I was in junior high school. Wind instruments are indispensable for brass band clubs in junior high and high school. In addition, many people enjoy playing wind instruments as a hobby. So wind instruments are popular among amateur musicians. However, many people is facing a big problem. The problem is that wind instruments is not easy. In order to be able to perform as well, you must first be able to produce stable sound, but it's very difficult, especially for beginners and self-taught students. Why is it difficult? It can be difficult to make a sound, but the biggest problem is that you don't know what's wrong. So it's very important to have the teacher teach you. However, one problem in learning wind instruments is a lack of appropriate instructors. The brass band club at school, the responsible teacher at the club might not be a wind instruments expert. In addition, there are few music schools that teach wind instruments than the piano. Actually, when I was a junior high school student, I was in trouble because I didn't have a senior who could teach me how to practice a musical instrument. So I decided to go to the clarinet lesson course, but I had a hard time finding it because the number of cards was small. From these things, it's often the case that beginners cannot notice what is wrong with practice. Therefore, aim for a visual approach and support to solve what is wrong with beginners and self-taught scholars. But to improve this situation, efforts have been made to support the practice of musical instruments. For example, this system analyzes sound quality of violin performance and provide visual feedback to users in real time. You can receive an evaluation of 5 items consisting of pitch, dynamic, and timbre. Next, this system gives notorious practitioners visual feedback of acoustic features in long-term training of wind instruments. This visual feedback gives about pitches, fifths, and note shapes. However, there are two main problems with this existing method. First, data cannot be continuously collected to provide long-term feedback. Second, not designed to enable anyone to easily check their performance on their smartphone or tablet. So our purpose is these points. First, make the system easy everyone to use. For that, we will develop the system as a web-based application. Second, it can be used continuously and provides long-term feedback by accumulating data. After satisfying this, we developed a system with a visual approach that can improve what's wrong and support beginners create stable sounds. Okay, in the next few slides, I'll be showing you our app Suiview design and functions. Before that, here I'll explain the definition of stable sounds that I mentioned earlier. First of all, this time we consider straight sound to be stable sound. First, a straight sound means that all three elements of sounds, the pitch, intensity, and the timbre, do not change. Therefore, this time we evaluate whether the sound is stable or not from the pitch, the intensity, and the timbre. Okay, this slide shows our app Suiview's basic design and function. This app analyzes the pitch, intensity, and the timbre of recorded sounds, then evaluates their stability and provide visual feedback to users. In addition, you can perform self-assessment and receive comments from others, such as teacher. Furthermore, repeated use allows data to accumulate and provide long-term feedback. Okay, let's explain why actually looking at the application. You can actually use it from this QR code, so let's try it. And wait a minute, please. Okay. Oh, wait a minute, please. Okay, this is a Suiview login screen. You can log in from this button. Let's tap. You can also log in with your Google account or email address and password. Let's select account. Okay. Well, this is home screen. You can select default practice folder. There are 3 types for the long tone, sustained tone, and scale and arpeggio. Now let's tap long tone folder. Okay, this is for the screen. In this screen, you can get long-term feedback and recording. So let's start recording. Press this button to start. So now recording. Okay. You finished recording. You must tap this completed button. After that, recorded data will be added this screen. So let's tap in this item. So this screen is detail of music. So tap this play button. You can listen to the recorded performance. So let's listen. So sounds okay. And you also check and change self-assessment from here. And you can see stability of 3 elements of sound, pitch, intensity, and timbre. And also this score is a total score of them. The calculation methods will be explained later. Okay, next, this area, you can get visual feedback. You can see 3 graphs of pitch, intensity, and timbre. Okay, and this helps you what's wrong with your performance. Okay, and from here, you can see the accumulated data. And this graph shows stack stability. You can see at a glance whether your performance has improved. In addition, you also see the graph of pitch, intensity, and timbre that was overlaid. So let's show. Wait, please. Okay, you can see this graph. So you notice your own habits by overlaying graphs. Okay, that's all for the application demonstration. Let's go back to the slides. Okay, here I'll explain how to calculate the stability. First, the graph display and the stability calculation use fundamental frequency for pitch, amplification for intensity, and the spectral roll for timbre. When the sound is straight, each graph is straight, as shown in this figure. And however, when the sound is unstable, the graph shows large changes as shown below. Okay, therefore, it is for sure to think that it is only necessary to see how much the future amount fluctuates. So we define the stability as the temporal standard deviation of each future. As a side note, if the knot changes as scale shown in this graph, the stability within the knot is measured by separating each knot. That each sigma represents the temporal standard deviations of each feature. Then the stability is shown this formula, and this predefined constants. The stability has a value between 0 to 100. So these predefined constants were determined from the performance data of 5 clarinet players. Okay, next slide shows our Suiview teacher mode. Also, objective visualization is useful for novice player. Subjective evaluation and comments by the teacher is also important. So we also have a teacher mode. Log in with the teacher mode, it looks like this. Okay, you can listen to sound recorded by the linked student mode users and check the visualization of acoustic features and stability scores from here. Also, using the teacher mode, you can write comments for students from this area. The comments automatically send the corresponding student mode user. Okay, in the next few slides, I'll be showing you about trial use. This time, three participants used our app for a preliminary evaluation and effectiveness of the app. Out of the three participants, one was an active intermediate to advanced level player. The other two were novice, so they had experience in playing instruments in the past. They logged in with the student mode and played a long tone scale arpeggio on the clarinet several times and recorded them on our app. Next, they saw the visualization of the sounds made by our app and were asked to answer this question on 4-level scale. 4 is agree, 1 is disagree. The result shows that the participants appreciated our app relatively well. In addition, I was able to get these comments from two novice participants that they know choiced something but that they did not choose in one practice by looking at the graph. On the other hand, one participant answered that she couldn't understand what each graph means, so more intuitive generation should be explored. We also received an opinion that they wanted to see analysis for sounds given by professional players. From these things, the following 3 points can be mentioned as future work. First, more intuitive visualization should be explored. Second, improved stability accuracy. Finally, extend the app to support such advanced level players practice. Okay, finally, I'd like to summarize. In this study, we developed a web-based application, Suiview. This application evaluates 3 points of pitches, intensity, and temper, and gives visual feedback to the user. By the trial use, this application helps to produce a stable sound. Please use it once. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. So any questions or comments? So if you have some questions, please click raise your hand on the reaction button below, or please type your question on the designated Slack channel. The paper is 1-1. Okay, thank you for your applause. Okay, maybe I will start. Question. Okay, so I have a question. So when you show us the screen of your demo, there was a curve for the intensity, yes. And when you let us hear the sound of a clarinet, it did not sound like the intensity is decreasing, but the graph was kind of decreasing over time. Is the intensity graph correct, or was it really decreasing?
Nearly decreasing.
Okay, all the time.
Yes.
Okay. So did you check somehow how these graphs are correct or not?
Yes, I check this graph is correct.
So you played by yourself
Uh,
and check the graph. I see.
Yes, I try play and check.
Mhm. So how is the reliability of this intensity? Because if you, for example, if you put the microphone close to the clarinet, maybe you will have a higher intensity. And
Uh,
if you accidentally move your smartphone or something, then it could change. The intensity could be changed. So how do you think about the reliability?
I place some distance from smartphone, and I place with movement, so intensity changed.
Okay, so in another question, is there any instructions on the in the app? Instructions how to play, for example, please play your clarinet 5 meters away from the microphone, or are there any instructions?
Instructions.
説明ガイド
Instruction.
So far, no?
So far, yes, far. So far.
Is there any instructions?
Okay. So I start. Okay. You can. The user can write a comment from here, and if this is a student mode, but login as teacher mode, teacher can write comment here, and this comment send teacher students mode this comment area.
I mean, so do the app show some message how to play the clarinet when they record the sound? Maybe
that one. Sorry, one more, please.
Oh, okay. So is there any instructions that explain how to play your clarinet in front of the app?
How to play?
Like how many meters you have?
Okay. In this time, I think 2 meter.
2 meters.
2 meter. About, yes.
Okay. Does the app say about that? Does the app write message?
Write message.
そういう説明はありますか?
No.
Okay. Okay. That was my question. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
No. It's all right. Any questions? It seems some Amazon package ping my house, but I will ignore that. Any questions? Okay, maybe one more. So for the score of the intensity, you use the exponential function.
Yes.
So have you compared with other options, like using the value of deviation itself?
No.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So I'll try. I want to try another method. I think. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. So let's applause to this presentation, and we'll go to the next presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so the second presentation will be continuous parameter control using an on-off sensor in the augmented handheld triangle. So if you are ready, please share your screen and start your presentation.
Okay, sharing the screen right now.
Okay.
I will just use the full screen mode.
Okay.
Okay, well, is everyone seeing the screen and in full screen?
Yeah, it's in full screen.
Okay, so let's start. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcio A, and I will present this work. It's the continuous parameter control using an on-off sensor in the augmented handheld triangle. I made this work along with Professor Tiago Tavares. We are both from Brazil, from the University of Campinas, also known as Unicamp. So let's start doing a short introduction about augmented musical instruments that are instruments that undergo through some kind of modification for obtaining new expression possibilities. And there are many ways to modify these instruments, but one that is very popular is use sensors for capturing gestures. So here in the pictures, we have two examples of augmented instruments. In the first one, for both of these works, capacitive sensors were used. And in the pictures in the left, capacitive sensors were used in the fretboard of one guitar for extracting information for the left hand position and the pressure of the fingers on the fretboard. And in the right, they use this capacitive surface that is placed in the body of the instrument. So while playing, you can touch this the body of the instrument, and the sensors will get some data, and this will be used for trigger some sound effects, and will give some expression possibilities. And well, while we're trying to build augmented instruments, there are some important aspects. And the first one is use gestures that are not directly related to sound generation. I will explain a little bit of that later. And the second one are choosing proper mapping strategies. There should have a mapping between the inputs, the sensor data you get, and the outputs, the sounds that you want to obtain. So this is an interesting question when related to a learning curve. So if you do not choose a proper mapping strategy, maybe the learning curve can be very difficult, and this will be not good for your instrument. And also when creating an augmented instrument, you want to be less invasive as possible. And if you start to modifying the instrument, you want to preserve the original instrument features or the playing techniques, and maybe not in every case, but you want to also preserve the acoustic sound. So you'll have to care about this as well. And here's the proposal of our work. We propose our proposal is a mapping strategy based on a capacitive on-off sensor for controlling continuous sound parameters. We applied this strategy for building a new augmented musical instrument. We called it Trialme. The name came from the translation to Portuguese from the term augmented triangle, in Portuguese, triângulo aumentado. And we want to evaluate the musical possibilities inside the context of the regional Brazilian music, and also for avant-garde music, since we're creating a new instrument, so it should fit for other music styles as well. So maybe many of you may not know, but the triangle in the context of Brazilian regional music is played slightly different as the way it's played in an orchestra. Here I have a picture. of a musician holding the triangle with one hand and striking with using a mallet with the other hand. And he used the hand for damping, making damping movements for damping the sound of the instrument. I wanted to share a video, but I will share this later on Slack because maybe we can have some issues with copyright, so you can have a better idea. But there are 2 points that are important to say here. The first one is the hand that is holding the triangle. Instead of keeping the triangle hang by a nylon string or something similar, you hold with your hand, use the hand for damping, and you have your thumb finger that can press the tip of the triangle. So this is a gesture that we can take advantage for doing something else, for generating another kind of sound. And this was, I refer when I was talking about using the gestures that are not directly responsible for generating sounds. And here, I will talk about the development process. Here in the picture, I have 2 trialms. It's really a project that was based on the concept of having a low cost. Here in Brazil, we have several issues with importing electronics, and this can be very expensive sometimes. So the better option for us is always use low cost components and easy design solutions. So basically, the instrument is augmented using only copper adhesive tape and an insulating tape and a wire. And this will be connected to a microcontroller, as we can see in the next picture. Here I have a block diagram. We use this, the trialme itself is a sensor plus a microcontroller. In my case, I use it on a ESP32 from Aspersif. And it will exchange messages through the OSC protocol, open sound control, with a computer. This computer can be a laptop or a desktop computer, or even a single board computer like a Raspberry Pi, and we'll be running pure data for sound synthesis. And also this third part here is not mandatory, it's optional, and is a smartphone that can be used to control the pure data patch parameters. So this is good for performance on stage. You can use your smartphone instead of bringing the computer to the stage. So the communication here is, as I said, done by OSC protocol, and the information can be exchanged between the ESP32 and the computer, either by serial data using this library from CNMAT, and also wireless via UDP packets. And here in the smartphone, you use the mobile plat interface that allows to create apps for controlling pure data patches. So here we have also the speaker output for sound output. And in this block, we have our mapping strategies. Basically, there are 2 mapping strategies. One is more common and is we'll get the input data from the sensor, and we have this trigger control mechanism that will trigger sounds either or touching or releasing the sensor that is placed on the tip of the triangle. So you can choose if you want to trigger a sound when you press the triangle, or you can also trigger when you release the triangle. And this will be directly connected to the sound synthesizer for playing, for example, an instrument sample of sound or maybe a synthesized sound. And the second approach, we have this block here, and we get this trigger control information and this will be square wave pulses, like binary information, low and high, and this will be filtered with a low pass filter, and we will obtain a continuous signal. And with this signal will be the input for the sound synthesizer, and then we can use it as a sound output. So here I have a plot of the sensor acquisition for the second case, in which we use the low pass filter. So as we can see, we have this square wave pulses here. and the output from the continuous control obtained by filtering the input signal. And we have an interesting result here that can be controlled by the cutoff frequency of the filter. So the higher the cutoff frequency is, the more faster will be this transition from low to high. And here we have a high level, and you can, this can mean this can mean trigger sounds, not pressing or releasing, because this is something that you will choose. So you can use for both cases. Okay, here I have a demo video. I just will stop sharing my screen to share the YouTube video now. And here, I have to share the audio. I guess, is everything okay? The audio is being shared. I will start playing now. If you cannot hear, please tell me.
In this video, we will
Is it
perform
okay?
a short demonstration
Yes, it's
of the
okay.
Triome features. Using the smartphone, we can control synthesis parameters like sine waves, square waves, or triangular waves. We can also change their frequency. By selecting the trigger mechanism type, sounds can be activated by pressing or releasing the sensor. In this way, we take advantage of the hand sound damping movements to obtain new mapping strategies. Besides, it is possible to play percussive sound samples like a shaker, or as a bumba, that's a Brazilian drum, or even a cowbell played with alternating sounds. Along with the triangle sound, it can produce interesting combinations. In addition, we have a sound envelope control interface in which we can control parameters for synthesized sounds like attack volume, speed, decay, and sustain. For sound effects, we also have a reverb controller. And finally, we can use the continuous sound parameter control obtained by low-pass filtering the on-off sensor information. The filter cutoff frequency will control some sound synthesis parameters, determining how smooth the sound transition can be. The higher cutoff frequency, faster is the sound transition. And that is how it sounds like when we put everything together.
Okay, I'll stop sharing and I will share the slides again. Second. And here I also composed the song. I called it Forró do Osc because forró is a Brazilian music genre. And using only 3 instruments, a 7-string guitar, a melodica, and the triome. And I will reproduce it here as well. I just need to get the link, maybe. I will share the screen again. Just a second. Okay, right now I believe you can hear, you can see the SoundCloud page, right?
Yes.
Okay, we'll start playing. Okay, stop sharing this screen and go back to the slides. Well, just a remark, I'm not a professional musician, so I'm sorry for any mistake that I made while playing and recording. And this, I have to do this by myself because we have all this pandemic crisis, and we also have to keep safe in our houses. So I have to do this alone, and I wanted to try it with professional musicians, maybe so they could give their opinion about the instruments. Well, the conclusions here, we can see the relationship between mapping strategy and the musical language context is important because I achieved a different result when I consider the triangle inside the context of the forró music and the Brazilian music context. And we can also say that this idea of using capacitive sensors in the sequence mapping strategy can also be applied to other percussion instruments, and I encourage persons to do this as well. And the third thing is, since this instrument is being simple to build and having low cost, it's useful for different applications. Here in the pictures, I don't know if you can see it properly, but I have the videos, I will share it later. We have two musicians, they are also playing forró music, and they use percussion kits as well. So maybe Trialmi can help them because you can trigger some sample sounds and do some different sounds with this. So it's a use case that maybe can be useful. So I think it's almost everything. For future work, I really would appreciate if I had the opportunity for do these experimentations with professional musicians. I hope this pandemic is over soon for that. And as a suggestion, I encourage musicians and researchers to use the same approach for other percussion instruments. So I guess this is everything. I thank you so much, everyone, for everything. And that's all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation and your music. Okay, so question and comments. So if you have some questions, please click the raise your hand button in below from your reaction button, and or please type in text in the designated Slack channel. The paper number is paper 1-2. Okay. Any questions? Okay, then I will have one question. So I felt reasonable to one of the criteria that you showed us about that you were trying to use the gestures that are not directly related to sound generation. It sounds very reasonable to me, but isn't it that holding the triangles is actually interfering the sound generation part of doing a mute and unmute part? Isn't that the interference?
This is interesting because with the palm of your hand, you can dampen the sound, but not with your thumb finger. The thumb finger has no big impact. So that's why I put the sensor at the tip of the triangle.
I see.
This is so you can use that term that Perry Cook used back then in 2001 that he called spare bandwidth, because you're taking advantage of this excess of information that is used when you are playing an instrument, because there's gestures that you not properly use, or they're close to the use, but you can take advantage of them. And this is the point is the thumb finger.
I see. Interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so if you think of, as you showed in the final slide, if you think of the extension to other instruments, if we think about the rise symbols, so holding a symbol has a meaning of doing the mute of the sound of the symbols. So maybe the scenario will be a little bit different from a triangle. So in this case, the triangle was an ideal case for implementing this kind of gestures. Is that correct to understand like that?
Well, I must say that the triangle was a really good case, but for example, I was wondering if I could apply it for pandeiro. That's also a popular Brazilian instrument that is popular in Brazil. I'm not sure if it's really Brazilian, but you can develop new languages for that. And it's not about damping, but maybe for pressing or using a mallet to strike a sensor. And you, depending of the language of the instrument, you can achieve different results and different languages, but the approach can be the same. And this is a very good point because it's low cost and you can use on everywhere.
I see. Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you so much.
We still have some time. Okay, so another question for me is that regarding the sensor architecture here, maybe you can do more than tapping, maybe rubbing or, I don't know, clicking, or have you think of other ways of playing the instrument?
Yes, actually, I tried sometimes to use the own mallet for rubbing the tip of the sensor, and you can obtain different sounds. And as I said, this is a case for the context of Brazilian music. For example, maybe you can use a triangle, a trialme in the orchestra, and the language will be different. And this not limiting the work as well, but I showed that is working for a context, and maybe also be used as well in other musical contexts. So this is the point that I really would like to have these experiences with other musicians, because we can exchange this information. Is this the other musical context, musical language, maybe? So there are other possibilities. And another point that I want to say is maybe I chose an on-off sensor and not a proximity sensor, because if I have chosen a proximity sensor, maybe the triangle would be really similar to a theremin, because it will generate frequencies for proximity. And this is a thing that I did not want it. So I chose this approach because it has a meaning for the music context that I wanted to.
I see. Or maybe you can change the mallets, for example, mallets with different, what was the word? The different characteristics.
Different materials?
Yes, materials, like having a different resistance or something like that.
Yes, maybe it will change, but most of the resistance and the impact will be in the copper adhesive tape. You know, there is this insulating tape around the sensor for the movements of my hand, damping, not interfering the sensor itself. I was asked if there was any interference of the fact that I was using insulating tape, and I did this research later, and I counted the spectrograms, and I noticed that there's a small decay in higher frequencies, but it's not so perceptive that could affect the playing mode that I was using. Of course, that if you strike the mallet in the region that is the insulate tape is in, you will hear a completely different sound, a completely damped sound. But for the use that I proposed, is working okay.
I see. Very interesting. Okay, so it's around time, and if there is more questions, then let's proceed to the next presenter. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so the next presentation is about Locus Diffuse, an agent-based sonic ecosystem for collaborative musical play. So when you're ready, please start your presentation, please.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I think it's all set. Okay. Hey everyone, thanks for coming and thanks for choosing my paper to be a part of the conference. My name's Rory Hoy and I'll be presenting work I did alongside Doug Van Nort in the Dispersion Lab at York University in Toronto, Canada, entitled Locus Diffuse, an agent-based sonic ecosystem for collaborative musical play. And it's really exciting to showcase this continuation of ongoing research at the intersection of agent simulation, sonic ecosystems, and musical networks. And it's really focusing on facilitating communal and collaborative musical play. So the system is a symbiotic instrument of virtual environment, simulated agents, and human players. And it places participants in an environment, and they have energy values, and they're essentially acting as sources of energy and food for slime mold agents. So these agents move between close fellow participants and then try to sonify networks along their path. So the main sonification of the system is only achieved when interacting with this mediating other, being the slime mold agents. And this other can only exist and function through the relationship of players to it and each other. Control is not centralized to one participant, so it's not like one player is controlling all of this, and it's not like the slime mold is containing all of the action by itself. And the form is sculpted by the symbiotic movements of both the players and the agents together. So I'll give a brief overview of agent simulation, the biology of slime mold and sonic ecosystems, and also multi-user instruments before getting into some of the details about the system itself. So natural computing studies the applicability and of natural phenomena within ecological systems and biological structures on computational tasks. And this is done through mimicry, approximation, and inspiration from these structures found within natural systems and applying their principles and behavior to algorithms. Slime mold exhibits complex behavior for an organism which contains no explicit sensory organs, as the surface of the body is capable of tactile, chemical, and photoreceptive sensing. The body consists of a single cell, but it can produce many space-searching tubules, and each of these are flexible and can search independently of the others. And this allows food to pass through the slime mold, pass nutrients to the rest of its body, and allows it to move using pulses towards positive stimuli and away from negative. And upon searching the immediate area, it tries to retract these tubules to sort of so it retracts the tubules and establishes a network between the sources of food and optimizes this minimal path between them. And this can be done in complex layouts such as mazes. And famously, this is sort of seen in the mimicry of the Tokyo subway system by Taro et al. In 2010, where oats were placed at the locations of all the subway stops, and then the slime mold was able to connect these together and pretty accurately mimic the Tokyo subway stations. Sonic ecosystems are defined by the generation of a reactive audio environment in which self-observing behavior and participant input result in audible dynamic feedback. And within Locus Diffuse, self-observation occurs at the agent level, so each agent is only aware of its own state versus the sense of others or environmental current states, and acts according to its sensory input in the environment. So environmental changes and subsequent sonification are results of this interplay between both players and the agents. Multi-user instruments are developed to explore close relationships between players and the resulting play techniques, allowing many players to perform through one singular instrument. Designing for these contexts requires explicit consideration of what the system or instrument needs to convey. And Jorda 2005 outlines key aspects of these, which includes the number of users, user roles, player interdependencies and hierarchies, and the flexibility of each of these components. Complexity can be seen in these instruments that allow for actions of players to modulate the output of others. So getting a bit into the details of the actual agents themselves, the simulated slime mold is inspired and informed through its biological behavior but doesn't represent a purely scientific model of the organism. These approximations allow for some artistic flexibility while keeping the core behavior of the slime mold similar to the natural biological functions. The agents represent concentrations of cytoplasm within the slime mold body, and they're able to move beyond the edge of the body. And these represent the searching tubules that are dispersed by the slime mold and probe the surrounding environment for its nutrients. When a network is established between these nodes, it attempts to optimize, and agents react and retract to optimize along these main arteries. Agents maintain an energy level, and if an agent's energy is reduced to 0, it's no longer visible, it can't move, and can no longer cause synthesis. And this places an agent in sort of a death or hibernation-like state, which can be reawakened if an agent is within close proximity and has a high enough threshold of energy. Agents spawn in the center of the environment and are given a random seed, so you get a pretty even distribution of agents propagating out from the center. And players are visualized by these named nodes. In a real situation, these P1, P2, P3, P4, these would be replaced by players' names so they could identify themselves within the space. And the energy level of each player is represented by the color ranging from purple to gray, with purple being high energy. And when a player runs out of energy, they can no longer feed the agents, but they also regain energy by being closer to each other. So you can see between P2, P4, and P3, there's sort of a faint line drawn between them, and that signifies that they are gaining energy by being near each other. Agents have 2 sensors positioned ahead of them, one to the left and to the right, and they use these to determine which way to face, depending on what they're currently sensing. So the world is quite large in relation to their bodies, so these sensors are further ahead of them than their actual physical placement. And they allow for the agents to have an autonomous understanding of the environment. So no information is shared between the agents other than these environmental deposits. Agents leave a trail deposit when they sense other players' positions, which is their energy source, or when they sense another trail. So you get these sort of cascading effects of one agent sensing a trail, placing a new trail, and then further agents can sense that one, and so on. Agents keep a current sensory value, which they use to check upon each update of the simulation, and they use this to gauge which way to face, and they prioritize players over the trails. Once an agent is on a player's body, they have a chance to take a bite and gain energy, and this additionally causes sonification of the system activity. So the oral aesthetic goals of the project come from attempting to generate an environmental texture defined spatially by the positions of each player, and each players have a unique voice to ensure a personally recognizable timbre, so they can locate themselves, and these are also achieved through varied audio source clips, so that they're not using the same source clip for each granular output. Audio is generated using granular synthesis, which takes very short pieces of audio, and when these are fired together, you get a sense of sort of a continuous texture of moving through sort of a medium. And these grain triggers occur from the agents eating at the player locations. Messages of these, or the messages that cause the grains to fire, contain the energy values of the agents that cause them, and this energy value is then mapped to a pitch space for the grain, where low energy results in a lower frequency grain, and vice versa. Player movement is also sonified, generating beating high-frequency tones from 2 sinusoidal oscillators within unique ranges for each player. Higher movement speed is mapped to higher frequencies and lower volume, while slow movement will result in lower frequencies and more pronounced volume. This gives a sense of direction to the players and signals a shift when the structure of the agent network is changing due to the player position changing. All audio is spatialized with the player positions, so any activity happening to the right side of the screen will be mapped to the right side of your headphones. It's a stereo output, and all sound is generated by players will follow them in the space. Spatialization and virtual room simulation, is key to the immersive quality of the instrument. And player verticality is only represented spatially within the sonification and has no result in the behavior of the agents. So this, on the right-hand side, you can see the player's UI. And accessibility was a really key point of consideration for the networked part of the project. Control of the player movement is done through the center black square, and that's a one-to-one mapping of where they would be in the virtual space. And the right-hand side is a slider for the height of the player. So this was done in Max, and I'd be willing to give more information on that later, but I should probably skip that for now. So the visual output of the stream was hosted on a public live stream, and this situates the stream as the centralized audio and visual hub for the experience of the instrument. And it had a spectroscope on the left for all the players' generated sound, and it represented the height on the right side of the stream. So play sessions were held in 2 waves as open calls on set dates. And the first wave of play sessions focused on a single behavior state of the agents, while the second wave presented players with 4 varied states. Sessions lasted roughly 25 minutes, but some went up to an hour, and this allowed players ample time to explore various interactions and whatever they felt like doing in the space. Responses were recorded anonymously on Google Forms, and questions were not shown to participants prior to playing. As Wave 2 was centered around 4 different behavioral states, which I'll outline in a couple of minutes, the response form was updated to accommodate those changes, and questions were aimed at attempting to get a sense of the perception of the system in terms of relations with other players and the resulting sonification. The questions were worded rather generally, and the goal was to sort of coax out these detailed thoughts of players with the instrument, how they thought they were playing with others, and in relation to the agents. So the questions for Wave 1 were, what was your sense of playing in this virtual environment? What was your sense of connection to others in the virtual space? How did you perceive your own voice while playing? And how would you describe your ability to perform expressive musical action? Wave 2 states altered trail decay, sensory distance, death threshold, birth odds, and energy agent decay. And players were not primed on the behavior of each of these states, but the transition between each was announced to prompt the players that they will be interacting with a new behavior. So states moved sequentially through 1 to 4, but in free play after experiencing each, players could request to visit certain states. The experience states were solitary, needy, lively, and starving, and these were all the different factors that were changed between each. And these states were established to provide a gradient of agent behaviors while retaining similarities to each other, with the intention of having players map characteristics of each of these in their responses. And the names were given by me based on my personal interpretation of their behavior, and were not told to players. So these are some visual examples of what the states looked like with state 1 and 2. And then state 3 and 4. And you can see in states 2 and 4, there's much more pronounced presence due to the longer trail decay. You get a sense of sort of a record of their past movement. But they were more quickly likely to die due to the faster energy drain and lower threshold for death. So that's another look at state 1 and 2. So since Wave 2 was updated for the different states, questions from Wave 1 were asked again, but were asked including for each state before a given question. And one additional question was asked, which was, how would you describe the behaviors of each state? So there was 4 key observations that came out of these responses. And the first was from participant responses in relation to the perception of a sonic ecosystem, which was tied to the variation in sound source and intersected with agent behavior. So there was this tendency for natural metaphors to be attributed to the audio and visuals, with this one participant noting, I definitely had the sensation of being immersed in a medium, fluid. The dynamics of the particles, of course, were responsible for evoking this sensation, but so were the sounds and the way that they transformed. And while the players were primed on the agent behavior was emulative of slime mold, their natural metaphors of the agent behavior tended towards more commonly encountered phenomena such as like bugs, flowing rivers, immersion within fluids or fire, and noted as a reaction to both the oral and visual content of the system. While similar sources were used as granular input through both waves, the sense of a natural process was far from one-to-one with the audio, and was in reaction to both timbre and agent behavior. So this points to a perception of the emergent sonic ecosystem that's influenced by both variations of the sound source and by the agent behavior. So next is the interaction with agents guided by a personal connection or narrative. And one player noted there was a certain appeal to doing things like building bridges. And this was exemplified within states 2 and 4, where accelerated energy decay was either was earlier, causing death due to these quicker diminishing agent energy values. And then it would sort of result in players sort of huddling together to try to keep these agents healthy. And players attributed direct or implied characteristics throughout each of the states. And environmental related characteristics tended to be a product of more visual aspects of the system, noting like busyness and growth. Third was there was an audio and visual cohesion of the system found to be necessary for players to internalize a complete understanding of the system. And there was a trend to show that some player responses seemingly lean towards a visual understanding versus an oral one. And this was seen primarily within states 1 and 3, where these were sort of conflated as being similar to each other. While they would also note that their sonic output was different, they would sort of point towards the visual as being cohesive or similar to each other, based on that they had a minimal trail decay, a fast trail decay, which resulted in more sparse and less trails being formed. And lastly, the varied experiences of connectedness were reported, being a lack of connectedness, mainly connecting mainly with the simulated agents, or a connection to the meditative qualities of communal movement. And these reports of lack of connection were attributed to have a desire with a dialogue with the other players, as there was no voice or text. In order to communicate, they had to just visually move on the screen in relation to each other. Another focus was on the immersion in the system and sonification of player movements, which divided into 2 subgroups, with the first noticing a distinct gravitation to the mediating agent system and its behaviors, with one participant stating, "I could feel each of their positions in a unique way. It was as if they were taking up space in a room." And the second focused on interhuman sounding, while immersed in the mediating virtual space, with one participant stating that I found myself being more consciously aware of the other player's positions and motions, and adjusted my own motions in relation to theirs. So to restate sort of these key observations, the first being the perception of the sonic ecosystem was tied to both the variation in sound source, also intersected with the agent behavior. The next is the narrative-based personal connection between players and agents mediated interaction characteristics. There was a bias towards visual understanding of the system versus an oral one. And the locus of experience of connection were more varied, ranging from a lack of systemic connection, focus on interhuman collaboration, to and also to human-agent collaborative sounding. So each of these outcomes is a product of the interaction between both system behavior, player action, and oral and aesthetic visual decisions. This constitutes the sort of the various networks at play between the project's amalgam of practices, communal musical goals of collective and telematic structure. So in a post-social distancing time, we'd like to have an in-person scale version of this, and also potentially having sessions aimed at varied levels of musical experience, because we didn't select for things like improvisation experience or anything like that. And also sessions with reduced visual feedback to try to get a sense of how a purely sonic part of the system could be expressed within these ecosystemic interactions. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Okay, any questions or comments? So if you have some questions, please click the raise your hand button, maybe in English, from the reaction button in the bottom of the Zoom Okay, here is a question. So what kind of music was performed?
So the music was more focused around sort of a meditative textural kind of work. So I could show a quick clip of it. It's similar to what was shown at the start, and it's using the positions of the agents to result in sort of this environmental texture. So to some, it might not necessarily be too musical, but it's sort of building from this tradition of deep listening. My work with Doug and Doug Van Nort at the Dispersion Lab, and his involvement with Pauline Oliveros sort of comes from this tradition of deep listening. So focusing very specifically on textural parts of sound, timbre, and not necessarily melodic or rhythmic pieces.
Okay. Any other questions? You can also type your questions on Slack channel. So the Slack channel, this next Slack channel is 1-3, paper 1-3. Okay, so I have one question. So from the visual point of view, I can understand how those, the clouds or those points will move with the change of the death and the life decay of those things. But how about from the audio point of view? So what is the audio difference with these decays change?
Right. So with the various energy levels of the agents, that was mapped to the frequency of the granular output. So when an agent had very low health or low energy from moving too much without being fed, then the granular content would be much lower frequency. So you could start to feel sort of pockets of high or low energy just based on their movement throughout the space and how they're being fed or not fed. And this was also brought up in some of the responses where players would note certain sources would be more easily understandable as having higher or lower energy. So that's one thing we would also work on, is that players could potentially choose their own source of sound, and then this could maybe give a better embodied or personal understanding of energy mapped to the sound.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, so do you tune the parameters in order to not to converge into one state, or suddenly the music stops or like that? Do you have those challenges?
Not necessarily. We found it interesting to have those moments where it does just randomly stop, because it sort of leads to interesting senses of silence. And there is this sort of movement between the death hibernation state back to life. So you could get senses of silence by sort of essentially leaving the space. You can move outside of the parameter, or sorry, the barriers of the space, so the agents can't actually reach you, and you could allow them to lose all their energy. And then by converging back in the center, you would essentially revive them. So you get these sort of bursts of activity based on your movement in relation to where they are.
Interesting. Okay, so it's around time. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So let's move to oh, sorry, my microphone was muted. So next presentation is mixed writing with Karlax and acoustic instruments, interaction strategies from computer music. When you are ready, please start your presentation.
So, do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So I will share the screen. So Yes, hello everyone, and thanks a lot to the CMMR team for the organization of the conference. So I am a composition student at McGill University in Montreal, and I will present the paper we wrote with Marcelo Wanderley about mixed writing with Karlax and acoustic instruments and interaction strategy from a computer music perspective. So we started from the point that in the digital music instrument community or DMI's community, there is not so much talk about music, or in other words, why don't we discuss more about the use of DMIs in musical context or artistic context instead of sonification or sound control. Also, we observe that DMIs have a short lifespan and they are played mainly by their designers. So we focus on the Karlax, that is a gestural controller that combines different features, such as continuous keys, pistons, an axis in the middle of the interface, and 3 axes of accelerometers and gyroscopes. As many DMIs, the Karlax has no voice, so we need to build a sound synthesis and to define the mapping that will connect the synthesis parameters to the sensors. So the objectives of this study and setting up was to study 6 pieces for Karlax and acoustic instruments through the analysis of the sound synthesis, mapping, gestures, notation, and audio and video recordings, and to describe finally the role of the Karlax thanks to composition models, so and computer music metaphor, so from computer music literature. So we pick up 6 pieces from 2013 to 2018, and that they have been played by fabric nomad ensembles that are commissioned also. And the specificity of this ensemble is actually, so each instrument has its own electronic system and its own broadcasting system. So there is no connection between the Karlax and the other instrument. It's not the case for the last piece, Le Violon, l'Œillet, le Bambou, by Raphaël Tristan Joinville, where the Karlax will control some transformation of the violin. So we identified 3 main composition models: a model based on acoustic instrument sounds, based on electronic sounds, and finally, the instrument itself as a model. For the first model we select, we have identified that some pieces act a bit like augmented instrument. For example, in the third part of the discontinuous device sees a piece by Michele Tadini. We have the Karlax will play some samples of the cello. And in the piece of Le Violon, l'Œillet, le Bambou by Raphaël Tristan Joinville, the Karlax will play a physical modeling of a string. So it is very close to the sound of the violin. We'll hear a little excerpt. Yes, so we have a little excerpt also of the score. Actually, as you heard the Karlax play a kind of accompaniment of the violin, and the fingerings are notated by a consecutive way. So it means each end play 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the pitches are preset by the composer. We have another piece where the acoustic sound of the instrument is a way of inspiration. It is Fog by Lorenzo Bianchi, and the composer in this piece has recorded some samples of violin, and after he made a little spectral analysis, and after he make an additive synthesis for the Karlax. So yes, so finally the sound is not so close, but it is an inspiration of the acoustic instrument. Another model, it is the most common in all the pieces we have. It's here the Karlax is perceived as independent. For example, in Le Patch Bien Tempéré 3 by Tom Mays for flute and Karlax, we have a very clear independence of each sound. And yes, basically, the synthesis of the Karlax is made by the phase line format analysis, synthesis. Sorry. So in this piece, the Karlax play, so we have a little excerpt of the score. We'll play some voices of the path synthesis by pressing the continuous keys. And we have some motion sensors described in the little symbols above the part of the Karlax. And the Karlax player will also turn the axis to activate a tremolo. And the third model is a Karlax in itself. It means that the instrument is the main inspiration for the composer. As you have maybe remarked, that the design of this instrument is inspired by acoustic instruments in some way. For example, the continuous keys looks like a keyboard, or the pistons like a trumpet. And composers like Francis Faber wrote the beginning of his piece like a trumpet call with pistons. Yes, we have also another way to compose with Karlax in the piece of Michele Tadini, Discontinuous Devices, where the composer explores the instrument, starts with an extensive exploration of the piston, after the continuous keys, and finally all the possibilities of the instruments combined at the end of the piece. The second step of our study was to associate some metaphors from different strategy of the composer. So we identified 5 interaction metaphors from 3 articles that was for us very interesting and relevant. So two from the Caramio and all article that mapping through listening, the shaping and fishing one, and two from Vessel and Wright article, problems and prospects for intimate musical control of computers. That is catch and throw and space. And the last one to comment the musical task of the Karlax in interaction with acoustic instruments. So the first one, shaping, refers to scenarios where performers control sound morphologies by tracing the air, those salient sound features they desire to control. It is described also by a transfer of variations into a gestural morphology. So here we have a little excerpt of the piece Fog by Lorenzo Bianchi. So the one with additive synthesis, where the spectral analysis has been set on the continuous keys of the instrument. And we can see that the pressure of each continuous key is designed by the dynamics, like mezzo forte, forte piano, etc. The catch and throw metaphor describes the way to trap a musical phrase from an ongoing performance, transforms it in some way, and then sending this transformed material back into the performance. So it's really a real-time interaction that can be called a delayed real-time processing. But in the composition process, we observe this sometimes, for example, in Le Violon, l'œillet, le bambou, where the Karlax will control some processing of the violin in real time. Another example is Le Vent des Anges, which is a kind of improvisation with a shank, which is a mouth-blown free reed instrument played by Wu Wei, and the Karlax played by Tom Mays that will transform the sound of the shank. Yes, another metaphor that is really connected to real-time interaction is fishing, which means that it refers to a learning stage in gesture recognition. So it means when a specific software recognizes a gesture, it will play a sound, a specific sound. And we have an example, we can call that a fishing metaphor in the piece Fog by Lorenzo Bianchi, because the Karlax will play imitating gestures and will trigger and transform nearby sounds of the violin and the cello. Yes, the musical task metaphor is described by Wanderley and Ryo in 2002 by 2 points. The first point is a kind of traditional instrument playing. So it means, for example, isolated notes, trills, glissandi that can be played by a digital music instrument. But also we have the category other metaphor to describe the triggering and organization in time of sequences. We have seen before, for example, the call of piston by in the piece of Francis Faber. So it is really, it fits with this metaphor, this category. And lastly, the metaphor space in the Vessel and Wright article suggests musically interesting trajectories for gesture. So in this metaphor, we have a little example of Ripples Never Come Back by Michele Tadini, where the Karlax will prolong a figure that is start by the two other instruments, and it evokes a distancing by controlling an arpeggio that we see on the excerpt of the score. And this arpeggio is controlled by the rotation of the axis, which trigger a pitch bend. Also the inclination of the instruments, and the sound of the instrument will be activated by pressing the continuous keys, the first one for the volume, and after we have the filtering, slow down envelope, and the repetition of the arpeggio. Yes. So about use of composition models and metaphors. Firstly, we can say that it is a useful framework and a powerful analytical tools. For example, for the two first composition model, an issue was in, for example, in the fog piece, where the Karlax plays an additive synthesis, and the sound is quite far from the acoustic sound of the violin. So we were wondering if it blend or not with that, and if it corresponds to the timbral augmentation of the Tuisrar and Macadam's article of taxonomy, if we could say. And so that's for us an important topic to develop this aspect of perception. For the metaphors, we have found that real-time interaction tools are particularly adapted to composition strategy or basis, and that develop a good option for encompassing strategies in terms of composition also. And it facilitates also communications between the instrumentalists and the reading of the piece as listener. And maybe a little issue is these metaphors can be limited on some musical aspect, like temporal and rhythmic aspect. Finally, on notation, we have seen different examples of notation. Actually, the basis of notation of Karlax has been set in the article of 2014, and it is a a prescriptive method to describe the Karlax. So we have seen also the more pragmatic approach by Raphaël Tristan-Joinville. And we don't have mentioned the piece Ritual by Andrew Stewart for Karlax solo. That is really interesting also, but the study was to combine also with acoustic instrument. But he has set up a very interesting way to write for Karlax with gestures categorization and a spatial representation in the form of a grid for the movement. Finally, we have no or little information on mapping and synthesis. And yes, as I said before, it's more a prescriptive notation than a descriptive one. And also, it can be useful in the notations or in the score to have this kind of metaphorical context to describe what happens actually. So to conclude, the continuity of this work would be to deepen the analysis of these pieces and to compare the different strategies. Also to compare with other DMIs, like for example the T-stick, which has a bit the same evolution than the Karlax. And yes, it's a study that is oriented in creation. So we opt for new pieces, but also to create new metaphors and to finally the main goal would be to keep this instrument alive. So thanks for listening.
Thank you very much. Any questions? So for those who are not used to the raising hand button, you can also type on the chat of Zoom. Okay. Personally, I was quite amazed and impressed by the Karlax of this instrument. And to me, it seems like it's a kind of combination of, how to say, the foot switch and also the instrument. I mean, it can, as a functionality of a switch, like adding a reverb or playing the piece that is played simultaneously or like that, but also it can play a sound by their fingers. And is it correct to understand like that? It's a combination of those switch and
yeah, actually there are a lot of switches on the instrument itself, but they are not so much used because if the programmation you can apply what you want to do, what you want to trick with one button. So it's not not actually very useful to have a lot of switches. I think the main features of the Karlax is the axis in the middle, and at the end of the axis there are little bands that make a little tactile feedback. And yes, and the combination of all these sensors, I think it's really the main.
I see. So it interacts with others gesture-wise in this case.
Yes, more than triggering sounds. Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, and also the in the pieces, what was interesting, it's the different ways they create the pieces and they map the instrument. And yeah, actually not so much people have make interesting things with switches. But
I see. Your questions? Okay, my other question is that it seems that the analysis is, I mean, mainly the digital instruments are used as solo, maybe, I don't know the correct wording, but solo or doing a battle with other instruments? How do you think about more other ways of playing style, like solo and accompaniment, or I don't know, accompaniment can exist in this scenario, but, or those like trying to assist the acoustic instruments with additional instruments or like that. Is there any case like that?
Yeah, if I understand well, I think that's really a thing that is not so much developed. That is for that our study focuses on interaction with the instrument. But finally, we focus on only on small ensemble. What happens with a bigger ensemble, and what kind of role that could be really interesting to deep into that. Yeah, actually, I'm really interested in that, and also in the perception of the result of the place of the loudspeakers, because finally the instrument itself has no sound, so we have to configure all this aspect.
I see. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. So we'll proceed to the final presentation. Okay, so the final one will be 3-dimensional skeleton motion generation of double bass from musical score. So when you're ready, please start your share your screen, please. Okay, please start.
For the introduction, my name is Takeru Shirai. I'm a student at Nagoya Institute of Technology in Japan. It is a great honor to be able to speak here today. Today, I'd like to talk about the 3D skeleton motion generation of double bass from musical score. Our presentation consists of 6 parts. First, introduction, then related work, our work, experiments, results, and future work. First, I'd like to talk about the motivation for our study. I think there are 2 important elements in playing music. These are auditory information and visual information. In music, performance motion plays an important role among visual information. But the main study on automatic performance generation is focused on auditory information. The reason why performance motion is important is that the performer obtains a lot of information from the chorus's performance motion in order to match the timing, tone, articulation. Therefore, we focused on the visual information and set our goal to generate the performance motion. The target instrument is the double bass. We chose the double bass for 2 reasons. First, a double bass is a type of broad string instrument which have a large amount of visual information. Second, double bass is used in many performance styles such as orchestral music, wind music, and jazz. If it is possible to generate performance motion of double bass players can use it as a reference, and the other instrument players who play with double bass can improve their ensemble abilities by practicing according to the generated motion. There are not many previous studies on generation of performance motion. From among of them, I'd like to introduce two excellent previous studies that I refer to. The first one is MIDI to pause by Lee. In this study, they proposed a method to generate a pianist performance motion from MIDI. They first used 2CNN to pass the raw inputs of a MIDI note stream and metric structure, and feed the extracted feature representation to an LSTM network to generate the performance motion as a sequence of 2D upper-body joint coordinates forming a skeleton. The design of the LSTM network in our study is based on this one. Second one is body movement generation for expressive violin performance applying neural networks by Ryo. This study proposed body movement generation framework for expressive violin performance. This framework consists of three models, namely the bowing model for right hand, and position model for left hand, and expression model for body. We applied this structure in our study to verify whether the accuracy of the naturalness of performance motion could be improved. Now, I'd like to explain our insistence on the beginning of our study. Both two previous studies generated 2D motion from real performance, such as MIDI and audio signal. There is a strong relationship between performance sound and performance motion. But we thought that performance motion could be generated from musical score. Ideally, I'd like to generate performance motion and performance sound from musical score at the same time. But first, we aim to generate only performance motion. Now, I'd like to explain the method for generating performance motion in our study. We try to use a two-layer LSTM network in accordance with MIDI to pause. Then we change the input data to musical score information. The output data is sequence of 3D upper body joint coordinates forming a skeleton. We attempted to extend motion data from 2D to 3D. We needed to decide what to use from the musical score information as input data. And we decided to use three types of information from the score. First is pitch information. And second is bowing information, which is a key to use motion of right arm. And third is position information, which is a key to motion of the left arm. We will verify whether the information are effective in improving the accuracy of generating performance motions. Each of these three pieces of information is treated as input data in the form of one hot vector. And we needed to verify if we could just connect the three types of information, or if we need to think out the structure of models in a different way. Next is about structural models. First, model 1 generates a performance motion from a piano sequence only. Second, to verify the effect of using additional information for wing and position information, we designed model 2. This model's data is a 44-dimensional sequence of Boeing and position just connected to the piano roll sequence. At last, to verify the effect of changing the structure of models, we designed Model 3. This model generates right arm motion from the Boeing sequence and the left arm from position sequence, and the other joint point from the piano roll sequence independently. Now, I'd like to explain the flow of the experiment. Since there is no dataset available for both musical score and motion, we started by building a dataset. In experiment 1, we verified the effect of using the additional information by comparing the accuracy of the generated performance motion from Model 1 and Model 2. Experiment 2 verified the effect of changing the structure of the models by comparing the accuracy generated performance motion from Model 2 and Model 3. I'll introduce about evaluation methods in this study later. Now, I'd like to talk about building the dataset. Let's talk about musical score data. Target songs are 10 edges from Shimando's 30 edges for the string bass. There are two main ways to play in the double bass. First one is Aiko, which is rubbing the strings with the bow. Second is pizzicato, which is plucking the strings with the fingers. In this dataset, only Aiko is used. And we added string and information to musical score. This work, we used sheet musical creation software, MuseScore. And we extracted the pitch, scoring, and position information in the form of one vector. Next is about motion data. We collected the motion data by using perception neuron, which is an inertial motion capture. In order to synchronize the motion information with score information, the performance was performed at the tempo specified in the musical score. We recorded motion data at 30 frames per second. And as described in this figure, we generated 15 joint points of the upper body, excluding the fingers. Now, I'd like to talk about evaluation methods. First, we propose two criterion for objective evaluation. Criterion 1 is average of the difference of coordinates at each joint point and in each frame between the recorded data and generated data. In this criterion, the smaller W, the higher the accuracy. Criterion 2 is the average of the ratio of the change between adjacent frame at each joint point. In this criterion, the closer the value is to 1, the higher the accuracy. The subject evaluation. We used a 4-point rating for naturalness of the generated data by 16 double-bass players. The reason for limiting the test subjects to double-bass players is that they need to be able to imagine the performance motion from the musical score. Now, I'd like to show you the evaluation results. From left to right, objective evaluation result in criterion 1. Next is objective evaluation result in criterion 2. At last, subjective evaluation result. Explain again, model 1 generates performance motion from a piano roll sequence only. And model 2's input data is a sequence of bowing and position sequences just connected to the piano roll sequence. And model 3 generates right arm motion from the bowing sequence, and the left arm motion from the position sequence. And there are the joint points from the piano roll sequence independently. As I explained earlier, in criterion 1, the smaller value, the higher the accuracy. In the criterion 2, closer the value is 1, to the higher the accuracy. Therefore, model 2 is more accurate than model 1, and model 3 is more accurate than model 2 in both criterion 1 and criterion 2. The same result was also obtained for the subject evaluation. Let me wrap up. These results indicate that the additional information has the effect of increasing the naturalness of the performance motion, and that the naturalness can be further improved by learning each of them independently. Now, I'd like to show you the recorded motion training and the generated motion by model 3. First, I'll show the recorded motion for training on the left. Is a generated motion on the right. I'd like to the generated motion is not as smooth as the training motion. Finally, I'd like to talk about some future works. The first future task is automate the addition of bowing and position information. In our study, we added bowing and position information manually, but if automatic estimation could be used, more data could be used for training, which would increase the accuracy. Next task is generation of finger motion. I think using finger information would be promising. The next task is representation of the playing expressions. In this study, we didn't focus on playing expressions, but this needs to be examined. The last task is to represent more realistic appearance, such as 3D avatar instead of skeletons. I'd like to That's my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, so now questions and comments. If you have some questions, please use the raise hand button or type your questions in the chat or to the designated Slack channel. The channel will be 1-5, paper 1-5. Okay, any questions? Okay, so, okay, here's a question. Is there any plan to apply this model to sound synthesis?
At time running, not only motion but also music, performance, sound, record and field learning.
Okay, so you mean if you learn the model with recordings, maybe it is also possible to generate sound from the input.
Yes, I think.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I have a similar question that you showed us that your how to say grand plan is to have both motion and also the sound. You showed us the goal, right, in the first part of this presentation. You mentioned that you're going to generate both.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So what do you expect for the sound? So do you expect that by generating the motion at the same time, do you think the sound will be much realistic, or what do you expect? Or much more easier to control, or there could be some motivations for that?
What is once again, please?
Sorry?
Wait, one more time.
Okay, so what is your motivation for generating both motion and sound at the same time? So what do you expect for the sound?
If we can generate sound matches the movement motion, the player with double bass can run accordance speed, I think.
Affordance, you mean?
According to the
okay.
motion.
So it's more like controllability or like that? According to motion. Okay, maybe I vaguely understood. Okay. Right. Thank you very much. So now it's around time. And so this is all for the oral presentation. Now it's time for a break. and we will restart. The session will be restarted by Shintaro Imai-san in after 5 minutes. Okay, so this will conclude this session. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Shintaro Imai, Music Chair of CMMR 2021. So this session is for music authors who wished real-time presentation or performance. First, performance by Anıl Samashi and Matias Villaplana, the author of the piece Misket and Canikas. So please start, Anıl and Matias.
Hi, Shintaro. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Hello. Hello.
I'm joined by my colleague, Matias Villaplana.
Great.
Hi, nice to meet you all.
We're hailing from, I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Matias is in Charlottesville, Virginia. So this will be a network VR performance. We'll turn off our videos and I'm going to share my screen. Is that possible?
So Matias, I'm turning off my audio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Anil and Matias. It was a networked real-time performance, right? Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you. So next oral presentation by Ryo Ikeshiro, the author of the piece Construction Ink Kneading. So please start, Ryo.
Okay, hello. Hello, thank you. And it's very nice to be here. So I'm not going to attempt anything as ambitious as a networked virtual reality performance. So I just have a presentation. So I will just introduce my piece. So I believe the piece is available on the YouTube channel, so please have a look. I will try and share my screen. Okay, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. So hello. My name is Ryo Ikeshiro. I am an assistant professor at the School of Creative Media at the City University of Hong Kong. So the work that's included in the music program is called Construction in Kneading, and this work is a live audio visualization of the Mandel box. So the Mandel box is a fractal inspired by the well-known Mandelbrot, and it can be implemented in any number of dimensions. So in my work, it's implemented in 3 dimensions. So what do I mean by the term audio visualization? Well, I use this to refer to the simultaneous sonification and visualization of the same source of data. So because of the fact that the same data and information is used, there are points of synchronization between the sound and the moving image, but that's not because the sound is derived from the moving image, nor vice versa. And so this is a technique that I explored in several works, including the one that's part of CMMR, so Construction in Kneading, which is a live performance piece. There is also a screening, a piece to be screened as a standalone work that's also on sale, called Composition White Square, White Circle. And there is also an earlier piece called Construction in Çamcı, which explores similar techniques. So audio visualization, this is a technique that's not new and may be found in several different fields. So my work uses techniques that are found in the field of auditory display. So there are, I guess, sonification methods that have been, I guess, inspired by that field. In particular, I'm using audification, which is a very simple method which just translates data to the audible range. And so I'm employing this method in order to let the sounds be as they are as much as possible. Within this field of auditory display, there are those who also juxtapose auditory displays with visual displays in order to increase the efficacy of the displays. And so my work could be seen as an extension of that into the artistic domain. There is work in perception, which explores the benefits of having both audio and video together. So although this technique is referred to sometimes as Mickey Mousing, and it could be described as being redundant display of data, research shows that well, you have phenomena such as cross-modal phenomena, where one sense may help another. So it could be facilitative. So sight may help your hearing, and vice versa. But it could also hinder perception as well. So it could be inhibitive. So hearing may trick you into seeing what's not there. And so these are, I guess, these are some of the arguments for having both together and to experience their combination. You have similar phenomena being investigated into research into sound in film. So there are writers such as Michel Chian who describe added value and syncrasis and the benefits of having both together. And I guess an earlier analog equivalent to what I'm trying to do is through the use of optical sound with experimental film. So with artists such as Oscar Fischinger, Norman McLaren, and the structuralist and materialist filmmakers, they would often work both on the film strip and the optical sound part, and in order to work directly with the material of film, so the film and the optical soundtrack, and in that way you ended up seeing what you were hearing and hearing what you were seeing. And they were also interested in the production process of film itself, rather than just producing an escapism that was found in mainstream cinema. And then through the digital means that I'm employing, it makes use of, I guess, features of new media, such as the ability to transcode and variability. The work that you can see on YouTube is a single channel version of construction in leading. Eventually, I managed to implement it in 4 channels, so 4 channels of video. So this is these are some photo documentations from that performance. So here, the 4 screens produce square space, and the audio is also in surround sound as well. So it produced an audio-visual immersive environment in which these the sound and the moving image were generated in real time. This is another image, and then this is an image from outside the screens. So in the work, I'm using sonification at different timescales in a technique that I've sometimes called self-similar sonification. So as you know, the Mandelbrot fractal has self-similar properties. So no matter how much you zoom in, you have more levels. You have the infinite amounts of detail, no matter how much you zoom in or out. And I haven't quite managed to replicate that, but I have used the data at different timescales. So audification was one process that I mentioned, which operates at audio rate. I also used the same data at what you might describe as control rate in order to generate rhythms, and I also use it at a much longer scale to implement changes at the level of, say, phrases or structures or sections of the piece. So that's a brief introduction into the piece, and so it's a work that I performed many times until about several years ago, and it's been on hold. And currently, the next step I'm thinking of is to modify it and adapt it for a high density loudspeaker array, which we are in the process of designing and setting up here at the School of Creative Media. So I am a co-director of a research and practice unit called Sound Lab. My co-director is Magnus Lindborg, who is a colleague of mine from the same school. And so currently we are in the process of waiting for our equipment to arrive. We have a basic plan for 24, 25 speakers plus subwoofers, which will be arranged in a hemisphere. And so future work involves trying to implement this, I guess, this sonification in an artistic context, using higher fidelity spatial audio. So I think I will stop there because my time is up. Okay, so this is an image currently without any speakers, but these are this is a mock-up of what we are planning. You can probably spot some cardboard boxes where the speakers might go eventually on these movable trusses. We have a big black box theater, which measures about, I guess, 10 meters, almost 10 meters or 11 meters across. And the height is about 7 or 8, I think it's about 9 meters. And it's quite quiet. Acoustically, it's been well treated for a space of this size. So we are hoping to have something ready at the beginning of next year. So hopefully you can visit us in Hong Kong once the pandemic is over. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Ryo. This immersive version of the piece must be very impressive. I wanna once experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so next performance by Sarah Hamilton, Bradley Robin, and Seth Schaefer, the author of the piece Telefocus. First they talk a minute, and then I play their pre-recorded performance. So please start, Sarah and Brad and Seth.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Hello, yes.
Great.
Nice to see you.
Fantastic. I'm going to share my screen. I've got a quote from our work here. So hopefully you can see this. And the part to look at, this is a lot to see. This is what we came up with as our initial program idea for this. And there we go. And so that being, if you see that, what we used for this piece is we took, rather than extraordinary images, we took very mundane, basic images and processed them. We took them and transformed them to make textures, to distort them, and to create art from them. And Seth is going to talk about our technical aspect. So basically, things that you would see on Facebook, or probably not see on Facebook, we use those as our source materials and then process them. Actually, what we did is we did a live performance on the internet during the pandemic where we did this piece, and then we took that performance and crafted this piece that you'll see momentarily. So I'm going to turn it over to Seth, and he'll tell you about our technical process.
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, so we're collaborating over the network. Brad is in Illinois, I'm in Nebraska, and Sarah's in Texas, so 3 different states that don't touch each other. So what you're going to see is a network performance utilizing a cascading pipeline of processing that combines audio and video that we share between ourselves. That includes, as Brad said, some live elements and some pre-recorded elements, including dance, such that we like to blur the lines between what is real and what is happening live. So in Telefocus, we use multiple software designed for the control, processing, and integration of all of these elements, audio, visual, live, data sources, into the final projection. So Shintaro, I'll pass it back to you to display the piece. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So now I will share this video. So there we go.
Shintaro, sorry to interrupt. There's something floating on top of the video. Would you mind removing that?
Something top on the video.
On the right-hand side, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Sarah and Brad and Seth. Very nice piece, and on YouTube we can watch longer version of that. So thank you very much. And next oral presentation by João Pedro Oliveira, the author of the piece "Things I Have Seen in My Dreams." And João pre-recorded his talk, and I play it. Oh, that from Robert. Thank you. Okay, that. Thank you. And yeah, I play it now by Joan's presentation. Okay.
For many years, I have worked as a composer, and I was very much interested in the relationship between instrumental sound and electronic sound. Later on, I started working with image, and I thought about what type of relationships I could get from the connection between instrumental and electronic sounds that could be transposed or transformed into the connection between sound and image. One of my interests is the idea of musical gesture. Defining musical gesture is a very complex task, and there are many answers for that and many proposals. Probably the most interesting of them comes from the theoretician Robert Hutton and the composer and also theoretician Dennis Smalley. Hutton defines gesture as any energetic shaping through time that may be interpreted as significant. It may be created or interpreted in any medium or channel, and it may entail any sensory perception, motor action, or their combination. Smalley also talks about this idea, defining it as an action directed away from a previous goal or towards a new goal, and is concerned with the application of energy and its consequences. It is synonymous with intervention, growth and progress, and merit to causality. In traditional cinema, usually gesture in image as a direct translation in sound. But in experimental video or cinema, that relation may not exist. As musical gestures emerge from musical elements including articulation, dynamics, pitch, duration, Hutton believes that any listener will understand gestural meanings intuitively. Our intuition can lead to very interesting and varied interpretations of the phenomena we are describing. Our first example comes from a very well-known movie scene. Let's watch it. Much has been said about the music in this scene. Many people relate the high-pitched sounds in the strings to the cries of the young woman who is being murdered. Low sounds that come in the middle of the scene and they stop little by little, they have been also connected with the idea of a heartbeat that stops, and so on. But for us musicians who have an understanding of what is happening in the score and the type of physical gesture that is required to produce the music we are hearing, we can certainly go beyond these interpretations. If we take a look at the score, we are talking about a simple repeated note on the strings, but the physical gesture that is required to play this section is very much similar to what is happening in the scene. Let's watch how a violinist would play this excerpt. So intuitively, looking at the violinist playing this, and knowing this will be the gesture, the physical gesture that is necessary to perform this section, we can almost interpret that the orchestra is somehow collaborating in the murder by doing the same movements that the murderer is doing with the knife. This means that the musical gesture and the physical gesture take on metaphorical proportions which separately would never be attainable. From the point of view of human agent and listener, the musical gesture process may be tactile and visual. Gesture in smallest concepts represents the fundamental strategy of structuring music, together with its complement, texture, and refers to an action directed away from a previous goal or towards a new goal and is concerned with the application of energy and its consequences. Indeed, any occurrence which seems to provoke consequence or consequence which seems to have been provoked by an occurrence. The next examples come from my own works. The first example is from a piece called Etignis Involvens. The music itself is extremely gestural. Every moment there is some sort of articulation in the energy, some progression. So by adding image, what I try to do is to have different energies moving around that would amplify the energy in the music and give it a new meaning. The energy in the image will provoke a final interpretation or an hierarchization of the gestures in the music. The next example comes from my piece Neshama. Both music and image are very gestural. The movements of the dancer help to create a certain path in the changes of the energy. The music itself also follows a specific path, but each path followed by music and image are independent. The last example, taken from my piece Things I Have Seen in My Dreams, is an example where image and sound go together both gesturally and texturally. I try to have a very direct relation between what is happening in the image and what is happening in the sound. In music and image, energy is present in motion, in time. It never disappears but can always be transformed. Causes have to exist to change the form of energy, motion forces, etc. The relationship between gestures and textures, both in image and sound, shape and mold our perception of time, and propagate into our oral and visual universe, or a combination of both. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Joan, can we see you shortly? Hello, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very impressive, very high density and beautiful piece. And yeah, people should watch your whole work and YouTube channel. So thank you very much again. Thanks. Okay. So we finished the all music presentation now, and on YouTube, you can watch the playlist of all selected works. The link is announced at CMMR Slack and yeah, actually announcement channel. Shortly, I show you the playlist like this, and it's also contains program notes and all necessary information. So please have a look and enjoy. So now there is an announcement from the program chair, Kitahara-san. So I pass to Kitahara-san.
Hi, thank you for coming to today's session, and thank you for your presentations. Okay, so from now, we'd like to start post-session discussion for 20 minutes. A post-session discussion time is designed for the people who would like to talk with presenters more casually and personally. Okay, so this discussion time is done with Zoom's breakout room function. So presenters, please go to the breakout room with your paper or music IDs. And then if you want to talk with the presenters casually and or personally, please go to the breakout rooms. Thank you.